Welcome back to another explainer. I'm so incredibly thrilled to share today's topic with you because it's absolutely going to change how you think about the connection between your body and your mind. We usually think of our brain as this isolated CEO, just sitting up there in an ivory tower, totally separate from the rest of the body. But today, we're looking at a fascinating, brand new discovery about a hidden, literal cleaning mechanism for your brain. And the wildest part, it is triggered by a tiny, everyday body movement that you probably do 1,000 times a day without even realizing it.
Actually, I want to start by asking you to do something right now. Wherever you're sitting or standing, I want you to just brace your core. Yep, just tighten up those abdominal muscles for a second. Now, while you hold that, what do you think is physically happening inside your skull at this exact moment? Crazy question, right? We usually think of our stomach and our head as existing in two totally separate biological worlds. But as you're holding that core tension right now, something truly bizarre and honestly wonderful is happening upstairs. Okay, you can relax your abs now. Here is the incredible punchline. When you tighten those muscles, your brain literally, gently swayed inside your skull. No way, right? But this isn't science fiction. This is a groundbreaking finding from a team of researchers at Penn State, and it was just recently published in the highly prestigious journal Nature Neuroscience. Literally every single time you engage your core, your brain physically shifts its position.
Part 1. A surprising brain connection. Okay, let's dive into this. For a long time, we've known that physical activity is broadly good for our brain health, right? But the mechanics of why have always been kind of murky. Well, this new research reveals that the brain is far more physically and mechanically linked to the rest of the body than scientists ever previously understood. We aren't just talking about invisible nervous system signals here, we are talking about actual physical plumbing. But to understand why a swaying brain helps us, we first need to define what exactly it's swaying in. That brings us to cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. This is the fluid that constantly bathes your brain and your spinal cord, and its absolutely critical job is acting as a biological waste management system. It moves across the brain and literally carries away the toxic cellular waste products that just naturally build up during normal brain function. If this waste isn't washed away, well, it can seriously interfere with how your brain works, and that buildup is actually strongly linked to neurodegenerative disorders. Now, what's really interesting is that we actually have visual proof of this hidden mechanical connection. Just take a look at this incredible micro-CT scan from the Penn State researchers. The bone structure you're seeing is part of the spine, but look closely at those structures highlighted in red. That is a complex network of veins running right through the interior of the vertebrae and all around the spinal cord. This right here is the literal physical bridge connecting your abdominal cavity straight up to your brain.
Part 2. The body's hydraulic pump.
So to really wrap our heads around how this biological bridge works, the lead researcher on the study, Professor Patrick Drew, uses this brilliant metaphor. He compares our anatomy to a hydraulic pump, with your stomach muscles acting as the literal engine. Those red veins we just looked at, they make up what's called the vertebral venous plexus. This is the physical pipeline. It links your abdomen directly to your spinal cavity, and its primary job in this specific context isn't just moving blood around, it is actually serving as a conduit to transmit pressure from your lower body all the way upwards and right into your skull.
Let's map out the exact biological chain reaction of this hydraulic pump step by step so you can really visualize it. Imagine you're just getting up from a chair. Step 1, your abs naturally contract to stabilize you. Moving to step 2, that contraction physically squeezes blood out of the abdomen and pushes it straight into the spinal cord area. Step 3, just like pressing down on a closed hydraulic system, that fluid pressure shoots straight up the vertebral venous plexus and into the brain. And finally, step 4, that sudden surge of pressure causes your brain to physically shift inside your skull. It is a stunning mechanical domino effect, and it's happening constantly inside you.
Part 3. Watching the brain move. Now, scientists are naturally skeptical folks, so they couldn't just theorize that this pump existed. They had to prove it. To pull this off, the team studied mice using some seriously cutting-edge technology. They used something called two-photon microscopy, which basically allows scientists to get incredibly detailed images of living tissue while it's actually functioning. They combine this with micro-CT scans to get these perfect 3D maps of the organs. They watched the mice move, and sure enough, right as the mice contracted their abs to move, the brain shifted. But to prove it was the pressure and not just the movement itself, they took anesthetized mice and applied a tiny, gentle pressure directly to their abdomens. Guess what? Even without the mouse moving a single muscle, the brain shifted.
The absolute crucial takeaway here is perfectly summarized by Professor Drew. He noted, importantly, the brain began moving back to its baseline position immediately upon relief of the abdominal pressure. This is the smoking gun, guys. It proves that the core pressure is the direct physical cause of the brain altering its position. And keep this in perspective. The amount of pressure they applied to those mice was actually less than what you feel on your arm during a standard blood pressure test. It takes very little force to make this happen.
Part 4. Squeezing the dirty sponge.
Okay, so now we know the brain moves, but how exactly does a slightly swaying brain lead to a cleaner brain? The team needed to figure out how cerebrospinal fluid behaves when the brain shifts around. To do this, they brought in engineering professor Francesco Costanzo to build some highly complex computer models. And he used a brilliantly simple concept to explain the mind-boggling physics at play here. He said, how do you clean a dirty sponge? You run it under a tap and squeeze it out. Our brain, structurally speaking, is actually quite similar to a sponge. It has a soft, porous skeleton with fluid running all through it, carrying away that dangerous cellular waste.
Taking that sponge concept, the engineering team ran their computer simulations, and the results were super clear. By treating the brain like a sponge, the model successfully simulated how the physical squeeze, remember, the pressure originating from your abs, induces the cerebrospinal fluid to flow through all the little folds and microscopic pores of the brain. The physical shift of the brain literally squeezes the dirty fluid out so it can be flushed away. It's like a self-cleaning cycle.
Part 5. Movement for brain health.
So, let's zoom out from the microscopes and computer simulations for a second and look at the big picture. Why does understanding this biological plumbing matter for you and me on a random Tuesday afternoon? Well, because it shows that you do not need to be running a marathon or doing an extreme heavy weightlifting session to get these benefits. Everyday movement naturally circulates this cleaning fluid. Just the simple act of bracing your core to stand up from your desk or taking a brisk walk access the pump. It aids in the continuous removal of harmful waste. And by keeping that waste from building up, researchers believe this simple, continuous flushing mechanism may actively lower your risk of developing neurodegenerative diseases later in life.
I really want to highlight this final quote from Patrick Drew because it is incredibly empowering. He says, "This kind of motion is so small, it can make such a difference for your brain health." I love that. You don't have to completely overhaul your entire life to start taking care of your brain. Your body is already perfectly engineered to clean your mind as long as you give it the tiny mechanical prompts it needs to keep running the pump.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative question to consider. Are you moving enough to keep your brain rinsed clean today? Every single time you stand up, every time you tighten your core, remember that you are gently squeezing that sponge and washing away the waste. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep moving, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.